Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to another episode of the Psychedelic Chat with the Organization of Psychedelic and Entheogenic Nurses, Open Nurses. We're so glad you're here. As you're coming on, please put a little something in the chat, say hello. We love to know where you're coming in from. We love to know what your licensure is, if you are a nurse or if you're an ally in the field of psychedelic work. We'd love to know where you're coming in from. I am Angela Ward. I'm one of your founding members of Open Nurses, and it's just been such a fun time to get to know more nurses that are enthusiastic about this work and to get to talk to some really, really incredible people. So today I am honored to get to speak with Stephanie Hope and Naku Kiwa of the Nursing as Sacred Medicine group teaching. I'm not sure what I'm going to invite them on stage here because I would love to have them share a little about who they are and what brought them here. So please welcome Stephanie and Naku. It's our first time having two people on at the same time. So here they go. Hi, you guys.
Hi, Angela. Hi, everybody.
Thank you for joining us. Please speak up if you can, just so we can keep the volume, or we'll have little subtitles. Welcome. Who wants to go first? I'd love to hear a bit about your arc that has brought you into doing work as psychedelic nurses.
I guess I'll go. Well, I'm here because of Stephanie. She invited me to start this course with her, and I was really excited and also nervous because at the time I really didn't have that much of a knowledge of psychedelic medicines, but I was very eager to learn. So my story is I was born in Uganda and I migrated to Canada when I was about 5 years old. My dad, we were having a war in my country. So we left my country to come to Canada for a better opportunity. And I was adopted by a Christian church, and the woman that adopted us was a nurse. Her name was Sydney. She was this wonderful woman, and I wanted to be like her because I just saw how she walked, and I really admired her and how she helped people. She adopted a lot of people from the third world countries, and then I decided to study nursing. And I also enjoyed the sciences of nursing, but I really enjoyed working with people and helping people. And along the way in my career, I first started out in gerontology because I really enjoyed the elderly. But then I realized that I needed more experience. I went back and I started working on the trauma floor, ENT. Then I went to dialysis. Then I spent 7 years in psychiatry. And that was amazing. But then I had to leave because it was too difficult because people weren't getting better. And I noticed that we were just medicating people, but they weren't improving. And then I decided, okay, I really don't want to leave nursing, but what other field can I go into? So I decided to try hospice because I was fascinated with death. And I moved to New York City and I was working for one of the largest hospice companies there. And then that's when I started having, I guess, my spiritual experience, because with death, you really see the spirit, especially when people are about to die. You have common themes, like the theme of traveling. A lot of my patients, right before they're about to die, they would say, so and so is here to get me, but that person is already on the other side, or they're packing their bags to go on a journey. And I also had two coworkers of mine. One of them was a monk, and the other one was a Taino shaman. And then through those experiences, it opened another door to the door of spirituality. And I wanted to learn more about that. And then along the way, I started studying herbalism, nutrition. Then I got into yoga, and then it just kept going deeper and deeper. And I wanted to keep finding more about who we are and what happens after we leave this life. And then that led me to plants. I was actually in New York City at a shamanic center where they do sound healing. And I was sitting underneath this plant during a sound healing session, and the plant spoke to me. I was like, am I going crazy? Is this really happening? But the plant kept saying, go back to the earth, go back to the earth. And then I decided, okay, I'm going to learn herbalism. And then I Googled plant medicine. And then that led me to permaculture. Then I got my permaculture certificate. And then I ended up in Costa Rica. And then I decided to learn more about plants. And I started studying fungi, both as a medicine and as a food. And then I really realized the technology of plants and how they are sentient being and you can communicate with them. And so here I am,
Wow.
more going diving deeper.
Absolutely. I have so many questions already, but let's take a moment and
Yeah.
transition over to Stephanie. I'd love to hear your origin story,
Sure.
and then I would love to hear how you two came together.
So I have been a nurse for about 11 years. My mom was a nurse, and I think I saw from her just how many different places nursing can take you in the different directions you can go. And I started off in oncology and then moved into hospice and then health coaching. And like Naku, hospice was really profound for me. And I really enjoyed the holistic aspect of that work and the spiritual, the emphasis that was given to the whole person, including their spiritual dimension. And actually, so yeah, I worked into hospice and then health coaching. And then recently I got my doctorate in nursing at the University of Minnesota in integrative nursing. And then at the same time, like backing up when I first started nursing, I had some interest in psychedelic therapy and was introduced through a mutual friend to the researchers at NYU who were doing the NYU cancer anxiety trial with psilocybin, and was able to work with them and to eventually become a guide for their study and work with participants who had a cancer diagnosis and anxiety around that, and using psilocybin to help relieve some of that existential anxiety, or that's the dimension that they were studying, at least. And at the same time as that, when I became a nurse, I started studying indigenous cultures and have been a part of a spiritual community and working with a teacher where we study cultures from all around the world, but especially North and South America, and becoming more aware of the long lineage of plant medicine and sacred medicine. And so for me, I felt like for a long time I was kind of walking in these two worlds, and now they're kind of coming closer and closer together in the world of psychedelic therapy. And so I started doing some writing and speaking about it with some colleagues, and we recently published an article in the American Journal of Nursing that was with Andrew Penn, who's one of the co-founders of Open Nurses, and a few other colleagues. And one of the recommendations that we had made in that article is that nurses should educate themselves and pursue continuing education about psychedelic therapy. And that's when I realized there really is there was a need for more education, and there was very little education available specifically for nurses. And so I was kind of in the middle, or more at the beginning of the pandemic, trying to figure out, I had sort of like the pandemic blues, and decided to create this course, Nursing and Sacred Medicine, Introduction to Psychedelic Therapy. And I decided to bring on Naku, since we are friends and we are part of the same spiritual community, and we share a lot of kind of core beliefs about these medicines. That's why for our course, we have 3 components. The first one, which I think is unique to our course, which often gets a lot less attention in other circumstances regarding psychedelic therapy, is traditional cultures, and talking about, just recognizing that the story didn't begin in the 50s and the 60s, that it's been thousands of years that there have been traditional people working with these plants and fungi and animal medicines and refining them. And there's so much knowledge, and there's a lot of wisdom even in the approach that they take, and the reverence that they have for life, and the connection between all life. And so we wanted to start off our course with that acknowledgement and looking a little bit at some of those themes. And then we also talk about the current research. And then we talk about the role of nursing, the role that has been present in the past, and then how we might be moving into the future, particularly through a lens of holistic nursing. So that's where we are now, and we've had 5 cohorts of our course. It's been amazing. We're now just launched a self-paced course online, and it's an amazing way for nurses to connect. And we've enjoyed so much connecting with other nurses because we're learning along this journey as well. And so it's really just about generating enthusiasm and knowledge together.
Absolutely. What a great origin story for both of you. I don't think it's unique to you, but I love hearing your kind of portals in here are through hospice, through more holistic approaches. I'd really be curious. You said that there's some values that you both share. What do you feel some of those values are that nurses in particular carry into this work that maybe you share, or that you feel like nursing as a profession shares?
I feel that when nursing is at its best, it is completely perfect for psychedelic therapy. I'm just going to move the screen a little bit. So we can, go back to Florence Nightingale, as we often like to do in nursing. And, she was very shamanic in her approach, in a sense, really focusing on the elements, on the importance of light and temperature and
Beauty.
And cleanliness and connection with other people, and how those elements create an environment where a person can heal. And that is so much what psychedelic therapy is about, creating an environment where the healing can happen, not necessarily performing a procedure or giving somebody an A, B, and C of how they're going to get there, but holding space. And I actually just was in the hospital recently around the birth of my son, and I really enjoyed the experience of being a patient and seeing the impact of the nurse, and seeing that if you have a really good nurse, it makes such a difference. And most of it has to do with presence, and the person being present, relaxed, listening, and like really there with you in your experience, through your experience. And I think that's what's really unique to nursing. And that's why I wanted to come into this profession, is because it's kind of like a doorway to getting to that special time with somebody, that like time in the moments when things happen. Nurses are there when things happen, whether that is, in an emergency or a psychiatric emergency, a birth, a death, an operation. We're there for those moments. And so it is, I think, very natural for us to hold space for somebody when they're going through an intense journey, like can happen with psychedelic medicine. I think what I'll just say one more thing, and I'll let Naku take the floor. But I think what we really hold as a core value together is just really approaching this with reverence for the sacred. That's why we named the course the way that we did. I was thinking like nursing and plant medicine. I mean, that doesn't really capture all the medicines that are available, so that's not the right title. But also when I thought of like sacred medicine, that's it. You know, that's what we are trying to tap into. And I think what we've learned from our course is that it's not just psychedelics that are the sacred medicine. It's in all in how you approach somebody, and it can be with giving them a glass of water, and it can be with having a conversation with somebody. If you have that reverence, it becomes a sacred encounter, and that's what nurses want. That's what they're really longing for in their practice, and oftentimes their feeling is not there just because of the systems and the structures that we operate under. So to me, like it's about psychedelics, but it's also about like healing in general and how we can bring that healing approach back into nursing.
Amen. Not going to take it away. Yes.
And another thing that we found, a common theme that was coming up in our courses, was how nurses really are the backbone of the healthcare system. However, we tend to be at the back of the line in research, and especially in this current phenomenon and this current movement of psychedelic medicines, you don't really see nurses at the front with research or even holding positions as teachers or even advocating for these medicines or being part of the movement. We're still at the back. However, we have so much power, and we have to reclaim that power. And we have to remember that we are innately natural healers. This is why we're drawn to nursing. And even our practice in itself, we always have that intuition, that sense that we know when something is going wrong. We're the ones that call the doctor when the patient doesn't look right. Doctor, you should come to the floor. Or are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure you want to write that? Are you sure you want to go ahead with that intervention? You know, so we do have that gift of a healer, and we really should be involved in this movement. And what I'm passionate about is also advocating for nurses and self-care, because we forget to take care of ourselves. But working with these medicines that remind us the importance of being clean inside with our own hygiene, our own emotional hygiene, and our taking care of ourselves, with taking care of our spirits is very important. And these medicines remind us to do that. And
That is, yeah, please continue.
I really do feel that nurses can do the best job with this. And that's what we
That's why you guys are here. Because we agree with you. Absolutely. I think that's really good points that you bring up, that nurses have a voice at the table around this developing practice. And I think that we do forget that this isn't it's not medicine in the Western sense necessarily. There's a component of that. And yet nurses are with people as they go through these transformational experiences in such a big way. I'd love to hear from both of you. What were some of the hallmarks of your training that you feel really prepared you to be able to be with people in expanded states of consciousness, or to help in the psychedelic arena?
That's a great question. I feel like I honestly feel that in nursing school, I was a little bit disappointed that there wasn't more of that kind of training. I feel like the focus was much more on, critical thinking, and there was some on communication, but there could have been so much more. And I think so much of what I learned was at the bedside, in my first couple of jobs, and in what I studied on my own. And so I feel like in some ways, the experience that you get as a nurse is irreplaceable, and what you get at the bedside, like just the variety of people that you come into contact with, and the variety of situations that they're in, and the variety of human experiences that you're asked to show up for and be compassionate towards. That in and of itself is just like such an amazing training, and it's always happening in real time. It's like you always have like multiple things usually happening that you are having to respond to. So it becomes something where you really can't fake it. It's like you have to develop that presence and that compassion that is just like available. But for me, I was interested in healing work before I became a nurse, and had already studied a lot of alternative practices like meditation and yoga, and self-healing like Reiki and aromatherapy and all sorts of things. And that I think it's up to each nurse to do that self-development so that you could be so that you can have that presence, because it's not a given that you will, because we all know that there are nurses that don't have that, and that you can feel that when you're a patient. So for me, it was a combination of like that very special thing that happens like at the bedside, that I think like my nursing has informed my work as like a healer outside of nursing, and vice versa. And then like all the work that I've done outside of nursing has informed my capacity to be there at the bedside or in a coaching session or whatever the case may be.
Truly as a healer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How about you, Naku?
For me, I learned the most through hospice. Just seeing somebody go through that process of looking well, and then just seeing their soul slowly go inwards or leave their body and go to the other side. Those common themes that occurred, like you literally see the life leave their eyes slowly, then you know that they'll be gone in a few days, and just really being there for the family. And I just wish they taught the family more information about that process, about the spirit, and how can I put this? That we continue going on after this life. I think that gives them more reassurance, knowing that even though the body is gone, the soul continues to live, and that you could still connect with that person through your heart after they've left the body. And I was able to have moments like that with some patients, because I did work with Tibetan monk or Korean monk, Korean monk, and Taino shaman. And they were able to bring those elements and share them with the patients and the families, and give them that comfort that that person really hasn't left them. They're still with them, like their energy and their spirits. And I really do wish that our society focused more on the soul, because we tend to ignore that aspect in healing, or even in our existence, that we have a soul, or it's taboo or religious or too spiritual. But it is the essence of who we are, is our soul. It's an important part of us. And we should address that more in our humanity, recognizing our soul and treating the soul. And that's the beauty of these medicines. They allow you to connect with your soul, and allow you to connect to other people, nature, and the universe itself. It just opens. It's like I think Terence McKenna said it's a telephone to the universe.
I love it. Yes. I think there's a lot to be said there. What both of you shared, the capacity for deep presence that we get to learn at the bedside, as well as, I mean, I suspect if I asked anybody that's watching us live to throw in those times when they've been connected to, not a dogmatic religious experience, but I think we've all had experiences at the bedside of these transpersonal or parts of soul, or parts of things that are definitely more psychedelic experiences, like death for sure, birth for sure, psychotic breaks for sure. Like there's some portal that we are able to connect to in that space. Absolutely. I'd like to turn it back to your question, or the statement that you brought up, Naku, originally around about being clean as nurses, I think is how you spoke to that. How, because we all know nurses are some of the worst at self-care. Like there's this weird badge of honor that if you can pull a 16-hour shift and not pee for half of that shift and not feed yourself, like somehow you are like the best nurse on the floor or whatever. But actually it doesn't speak in that way. Like, what are some of the things you think, especially as people might be interested in working with people in psychedelic space, what do you think are some of the self-care things that we really need? And how do you care for yourself?
Well, it's really important to own your feelings and know your feelings, what's yours and what is not yours. And it's important not to project onto others, especially when you're holding space. You don't want to, because when you're working with these medicines, the veil is so thin, right? And you have to be careful not to harm someone who's in a vulnerable space with your emotions. So you have to be neutral, not judging. So in order not to judge, you have to know who you are truly inside, you know. And how I do that, it's not easy because we all have our stuff from conditioning, from growing up, or for day-to-day stuff or things we pick up. So really going inwards, meditation is very important. Just going inside, just taking a few deep breaths and grounding yourself and centering yourself with your heart. And meditation really allows you to connect with your heart so you're not attached too much to what's going on up here, because what's going on up here is not always the truth, but the heart tells you the truth. Journaling is important because that helps you work out your feelings. Gratitude is important because when you're grateful, you accept more. You accept what is working, what is not working. You just accept everything as best as you can. And eating well, because nutrition is very important for your mind, body, spirit. Getting enough rest, knowing when to say no is very important, especially for nurses, because we're yes people, we're pleasers, and then that causes some animosity when you do something that you really don't want to do, and that causes more heaviness within you. So I find the more that you do these practices, you're more light, you're lighter, you're not so heavy. And another practice that I engage in is going into nature.
Yes.
Yeah, just being around the colors, the vibration of green, it makes you feel better, and the fresh air is good for you, and just having that connection with the plants, because we do have a way of feeling each other and communicating, and they do heal us. That's what I do.
All wonderful points for sure. How about you, Stephanie? Do you have anything to add to those?
Well, I think that working with psychedelic medicine just requires a great deal of maturity. And so I think when you're in a nursing environment, to really hold yourself to a high standard of how you treat people, how you treat your patients, your colleagues, and yourself. Because there will be many people who set good examples and people who set poor examples. But like Naku said, to develop that neutrality and that ability not to judge, you have to be really clear with your word, and making sure that you're just very respectful with your word and with your thoughts to the people that you're serving, and the people that you work with, because sometimes that can be harder than the people that you're serving, and then yourself, which for some people might even be the hardest. So sometimes we have thoughts and words against ourselves that are harsh. So just really bringing out that compassionate spirit and practicing it to a very high degree to build that maturity and that respect that can withstand the tests that might come up during those intense experiences with other people. Yeah, I think that's what I would say.
I think that's great. So what I'm hearing is that, and I think a lot of people would agree with this, is that in order to be an effective psychedelic practitioner, nurse, whatever that might be, that there's so much of our own work that we need to do.
Mhm.
So let me ask you a controversial question. Do you feel like nurses need to have experiences with these medicines in order to be an effective practitioner or support person?
I mean, I would say ideally, yes, absolutely. I guess I guess there could be a case made that they wouldn't, that a nurse could care for a person giving birth very well, even though she's never given birth, or a dying person, even though she's never died. But there's the but in this case, there should be the opportunity for people who are working with these medicines to have that experience, because from what I know, it's a very intense experience that's hard to understand or describe unless you've been through it. And so, I mean, we talk about sometimes um, the practitioners as psychedelic guides. So to be a guide, you have to know the territory. I mean, in traditional contexts, a person would work with a plant and study under a traditional teacher for at least a decade, probably, before they would be given permission to start, healing others. And so I don't think that level of stringency is going to be applied within this modern paradigm, but maybe, part of that approach could be taken where you need to do your own work and you need to have some experience.
Hmm. What are your thoughts, Naku?
I agree with Stephanie.
I think yes. So then the next question, and we get this a lot, is how does one protect their license working in these gray areas, perhaps, or, moving into an arena that is federally illegal, unless we're working with ketamine, for example, or supporting people in studies. Could you share a little bit about how you do that, or advice you'd have for other nurses?
Right now, I mean, the way that I'm choosing to put myself forward in this space is through education. And so that's what we're cultivating, is continuing the conversation, providing education. And I mean, I don't currently work with clients. I did work on that research study, and there are ways for people to gain experiences by going to countries where it's legal, and so and there's also a lot that the tide is about to turn in a couple years or less. In Oregon, it will be legal for people to have psilocybin therapy, to practice with psilocybin, to cultivate it. There will be those channels that people can go through, and from what I'm seeing that's happening there, they're looking to make it accessible and inclusive. It seems it's going in that direction. And once that happens in Oregon, it's likely to happen in California, and then et cetera, et cetera. And then at the same time, rescheduling is hopefully around the corner, although people have been saying it's going to happen in the next 5 years for the last 15 years, but that's okay. It's coming. It's coming.
Yeah.
So I think that, you can prepare yourself for that. And if you're really serious about it, then maybe trying to acquire experiences in a way that feels legal and ethical, or that meets your standards of ethics for yourself. But as a practitioner, I do take my license seriously, and so I don't I don't cross any legal territory, and that's why I'm really focused on education right now.
Awesome. Thank you. Anything you want to add, Naku, to that?
Yeah, I think it's important to just stay afloat with what's happening, because I feel in my heart that that door is going to open. So just stay educated and keep the conversation going with your coworkers, with your families, with your nursing boards. Get involved, and the more that this topic is out there, then that door is going to open quicker for everyone. Just prepare yourself.
I hope so. I hope so. I mean, we just decriminalized here in the city of Seattle, so I think it's going to be little pockets everywhere, and hopefully the wave will crest soon. And there's a couple different ways I want to take our conversation. One that is really coming up for me is, well, maybe I can blend these a little bit.
Mhm.
As you know, as likely you have heard about some different ethical breaches. Stephanie, you mentioned ethics very briefly there. Ethical breaches, crossing boundaries in psychedelic spaces. And as nurses, we have a very robust code of ethics, which I think it drives us and informs us. I'm wondering, and also there's a piece around trauma-informed care. A lot of people that are doing medicine work that are wanting to or are very traumatized. So how can nurses really get a good awareness around trauma-informed care and ethical orientation in their own learning and practice? I know, like all over, but
Well, I think that when we talk about like interdisciplinary care, nurses bring a lot to the table, but also there's areas where we need to, educate ourselves, or that's why I think, I like working with this education for nurses, and someday I hope that there will be, and maybe it will be something that we'll be involved in, like a training program for nurses to address the gaps in our training. So I think that you kind of just touched on like one of the strengths and then maybe one of the weaknesses, like strengths being ethics, code of ethics, training in that, and an experience in a lot of ethically gray situations that really come up in all areas of nursing practice. Um, and I feel like nurses are really aware of that, are really aware of, I don't know, of doing right, and of asking questions or calling in the team when there's like a question. That's really, like Naku was saying, like one of our roles is kind of the gatekeeper, like the last person at the line saying like, okay, this was the thing that was ordered and this is the thing that is going forward, but wait, is this really correct? And at any moments questioning, And so I think that leads to a strength in morality and ethics, and that's one of our strong suits. And we're also, as everybody in the profession knows, we're the most trusted profession for 20 years and beyond. And people see us that way. People see us as ethical and trusted. It's not across the board. I mean, there's always, exceptions. But in general, I think that's a strong part of our training. In terms of trauma and trauma-informed care, we're not, unless you're a psych nurse practitioner with a particular training, we're not therapists. And so I think that more knowledge of trauma-informed care, and also, creating really good client boundaries and being aware of, the nurse or the therapist guide patient relationship, and some of those paradigms that you might get in social work or in psychology. Those are the things that nurses might need to study and practice more in to be prepared for this work. What do you think?
yeah, love it.
Yeah.
Oh.
I agree with you. And I also find that nurses were strong patient advocates. So we want the best for the patient. And we can also refer patients to follow-up care or integration work following the plan of treatment, or if we feel that we can't help the patient, or if the patient needs further care after we work with them. So that goes back to interdisciplinary plan of care. Because I find nursing is very thorough. It's a very thorough science. And we work with a big group of people that fill certain roles that, or have certain skills that we don't have. So the patient is treated as a whole and not in parts.
I think that's huge. I think that's a really important part of nursing, that, if one is working in a clinic or hospital, like we can get really focused on just that, floor, whatever you're doing. And it's really important to remember that broad picture. And I think we do have training in that arena. So that's a really good point. And I think it's so crucial around the patient advocacy part. So to kind of tag on to the end of that, and also very quickly for our viewers, if you're watching and you have questions, please feel free to put your questions in the chat and we will leave room for those at the end. We'll pull those in and talk about them a little. But a question I have for both of you are, what are some of the potential pitfalls you see with the emerging psychedelic medicine field as it's perhaps coming in to be a more medicalized therapy?
Well, I see access to this medication for people who don't have the resources, or disenfranchised communities, people of color, people in a lower socioeconomic status. So access is a concern for me. And also if it becomes regulated by the government where you need insurance to get it. If you don't have insurance, then you can't get access to it. So that's a concern for me.
Those are big. Those are huge. Huge.
I think that there's, I've had a lot of concerns, and some of the things that I see that are happening out there are really scary, actually, like the way that, ketamine is legal right now, and it's like the only medicine that's more widely legal. And there's such a huge range of practices. There's practitioners who are very thoughtful and thorough and safe. And then there's, people who are offering this in really unsafe ways. And so I think I've kind of just made my peace with the fact that as the doors open, there are a lot of people that are working to keep it safe, that are working not to repeat some mistakes that might have happened in the past, but that there is going to be a wide range of practitioners and practices out there. And I just am focusing on how can I put forward something that is in integrity, and how can I highlight the work of others that are doing that, and try to, educate and encourage others to move in a direction that I feel is a good one, knowing that there's going to be a range of things out there as this moves into uncharted territory.
That's absolutely true. So then my question is, what role do we have as nurses for broader patient advocacy, and maybe versus one-on-one care? How might we advocate for patients on a broader scale?
Well, we could collaborate together where we could hold space for more than one patient, where you could have maybe 20 people coming, and so the cost can be divided that way for the medicine, versus seeing one client and working with more than one provider.
Like that's in a traditional context, oftentimes these healing practices happened in community, and so it's a more of a Western approach to have kind of one-on-one care or two-on-one care, and like the clinician client relationship, rather than more of like a community healing environment. That is something that comes with its own challenges, but is something that I think that we could work towards as a way to increase access, and also as a way to provide what the medicine may be showing us anyway, because so many people that you can read about in qualitative studies, and people will tell you after their experience that they, one of the biggest themes is connection, that, we need to, that there's a connection felt with other people in their lives through the influence of these sacred practices, that it seems like it's pointing us into that's the medicine, that's the real medicine that we need, is that connection. So creating communities that can offer support and inspiration and connection, I think is part of what we need to learn here. So I think that would be beneficial. I agree. Yeah. And I don't know, I think that there's just a lot of unknown right now. Like I said, I think, what I'm working on is just education. And for me, the antidote to seeing some of the materialization and commodification of all these drugs that are
Mhm.
being patented or attempted to be patented, and etc., is to remember that these are ancient practices and to recall that, to
Mhm.
recognize it, and to try to, amplify that side of it.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
That's great. I think there might be some questions that we can ask about that in the chat, which we'll pull up in a moment. But before we go there, what would you, if so, we have so many nurses that come through, open nurses, and I'm sure you meet them too, that are like, how do I do this? How do I get into this work? So, what advice would you have for a nurse that's interested in pursuing work in this arena? Besides doing the self care work and education piece, is there a particular path that you would suggest? Love to hear what your thoughts are.
I think that if you're really serious about becoming a psychedelic therapist, that
Mhm.
it's probably good to do a training, and there's so many trainings out there that are
Mhm.
available. There's MAPS trainings and CIIS. There's Synthesis Institute. There's ONCA, and so there's Open Nurses has a great resources page on your site
Mhm.
that has like a lot of the major trainings, and so I think that's beneficial. And then um, doing the whatever work it is for yourself, that most time of the time, if somebody is interested in this work, they've kind of already started on their path somehow, but that is going to help give you the experiences that you feel that you need to be able to do this work. Because um, let's see, I think that there's the official channels that where you can get some of the very important backbone of your education, and then there's the experiences that are kind of unique for each individual, and the healing path that you want to go on. And a lot of times there's lots of different therapies that can support this work. Like I know that holotropic breath work or Hakomi therapy are often kind of like some of the common ones, but there's so many different forms of healing and therapy and music and sound healing and prayer and working with plants, getting out into the garden. Like there's so many different ways that you can connect with different elements of sacred medicine in your own practice. And that's what's important, is having that practice and strengthening practice for yourself, because that's what your patients are going to feel.
I love that. Absolutely.
I also wanted to add, it's really important for service, especially in these times, just serving others and serving the planet. It's really important for us to do that, because it's not just helping another person, you're essentially helping yourself, but we're not serving for ourselves. That's not the motivation, but it does really help you to serve and be in service, selflessness, and not expecting anything in return, and just having more compassion for yourself and compassion for others, and kindness is really important. And also nurses collaborating together, because we are so strong. COVID showed us that. And don't allow any of your organization to treat you badly, and just remember your value and how strong we are. And especially during this time and this new psychedelic renaissance, let's come together and work together.
I love what you said, Naku, about service. That's something that was coming to me earlier. Like that is what we have. That's what nursing brings, is that heart of service, and that every nurse in this profession has kind of like been through their training and service. I mean, I remember my first nursing job, like learning how to care for like 6 oncology patients at once was, and just such a gauntlet, and like learning how to do it well and gracefully. And I feel like that's what we bring, and that's what we can continue to learn how to perfect.
I think that's so essential. I love what you both said there, because we do really, I think we come to this profession with the heart of service and deep care, and we're connected to a broken system that's just chewing nurses up and spitting them out. And we have that, nurses eat their own, eat their young, that's such a crazy paradigm to be within. But how beautiful that people come to this work because they care about other people.
Mhm.
So I love this idea of collaborating and supporting one another as nurses and being in relationship and doing this work. I'd love to open it up for some questions. I see a couple really good ones, and hopefully our lovely tech Wendy, who's helping out our other open nurse, will pop one of those on the screen for us. Yes. Hi, thank you all so much. Love your background. Stephanie, curious how you got on as a research study guide as a BSN, and how does one go about applying? I'm a BSN with ER trauma ICU background, currently in CPTR, right on CPTR, with a DNP school starting in spring.
Oh, wonderful.
Maybe we could take the question off so you can still see us. Excuse me.
Sure. So, bless you. I don't really know how I don't really know how it happened for me. It was very lucky. I have a friend, actually, Kevin Baltic, who runs the Horizons conference, is a friend of mine from another context, and it was one of the very first Horizons conferences. That's the psychedelic conference in New York. And I went to a talk that Jeff Gus was giving about the NYU trial. And afterwards, I was like, oh, wow. I was talking to Kevin saying, that was really inspiring. And he's like, well, let me introduce you to Jeff. And so he did. And I think I was still a nursing student at that time. I had a background, I had a background in research psychology. So I said, I've done some research before, like maybe I can help you as like a volunteer, research assistant. That's all I was really expecting out of it. And I started going to a couple meetings. And once I became a nurse, they said, we'd love to have a nurse on our team. I think they were looking for that diversity. And so I was able to become part of the clinical team, which I really wasn't expecting. I didn't even know if I didn't at that point. I didn't think I was qualified, because I was just a brand new nurse, basically. But I see now how that diversity of perspectives and how being an oncology nurse at the time was so appropriate for the study. So yes, nurses with a BSN are totally have a space in research. You don't have to have a doctorate to be a clinician or even to be part of a research team. Like I know, for example, that just off the top of my head, MAPS PBC is hiring for a lot of different positions right now. They're all remote positions. And so go to that website and see if there's anything that sparks your interest. If you're interested in research, being part of that, it might be, maybe clinical or maybe otherwise, depending on which way you want to go.
Awesome. Thank you. Wendy, would you share another question from Liz, who says, can you speak to how you are able to respectfully bring spirituality and ceremony into your nursing practice, both at the bedside and within psychedelic assisted therapies? You want to take that one, Naku?
Well, it all depends what spirituality means to you. But for me, I believe that just being a human being is spiritual. Going outside and taking a walk and connecting with your environment. So waking up in the morning and connecting with the sun and bringing that sun into your heart and then taking that out into the world and radiating out to your patients. You could do that. Or just having a ceremony when you come into your patient's room, opening the windows and allowing the air to come in to cleanse the space. Having a routine of making sure that the space is clean. The way you present food to a patient, making sure it's beautiful and fresh, and how you present yourself to your patients is also important and spiritual and ceremonial. Wearing bright colors or just being really who you are, essentially just expressing yourself and how God made you is spiritual in itself and ceremonial.
I love that. Yeah. Do you want to tag anything on, Stephanie?
I think this is something that I've had to really work at, and thinking about when I worked in hospice, even that's a place where it's so present, and some patients really bring it in with them, their spiritual practices, and some patients you can just ask questions like, what does that mean to you? Like, what is the meaning of this for you? Like, I remember, like, one question that I had read in a textbook was like, what is the patient's the meaning that the patient attaches to the illness? And I remember asking that to actually a friend of mine. It wasn't a client, but a friend of mine once, and just being so surprised at the answer and the depth of the conversation that came through that. So I think that those simple questions that don't necessarily have to be explicitly spiritual, but can bring in asking about meaning for people, and then also asking them, the practices that they enjoy, and that just trying to amplify and support those. Like, I know in hospice we had music, we had art, we had prayer spaces, we had lots of different options, and in some environments it's easier than others to incorporate that. But getting curious about the patient's own experiences of religion, spirituality, or just meaning, and trying to amplify that.
I think you just hit the nail on the head, is bringing curiosity in. That is something that I think we're really good at, about getting to understand the people that we're caring for. And it's really hard to do that if we're not energetically feeling clean, or, feeling like our we have something to give, So that's such a beautiful, crucial point. It looks like there's a couple other good questions in here. This is a great one. Wendy asks, what perils do you see with the mainstreaming of psychedelics?
What do I see? Oh my gosh.
Go. I mean, you mentioned access and a few things, and what else?
Mainstreaming of psychedelics, I feel like it's a beautiful thing, because psychedelics, essentially, the common theme with that is connection, right? So I see that we will be more connected with self, so we will have less illness in general, especially mental illness. We'll have a healthier population, and we will realize how important it is to maintain relationships with each other, families. We'll have more reverence for families and communities, and the planet. We'll take better care of the planet.
Do you see any dangers?
Oh, dangers!
Peril, any problems? Yeah. What do you?
English is my second language.
I mean, that part sounds great for sure. I think we're all on board for that. That's okay. What are some of the problems?
Sorry, English is. I read it differently.
I was totally with you, though. I think we were all like, yes.
So I see things backwards. So I saw, instead of danger, I saw the beauty, the opportunities.
That's probably why you're such an awesome nurse.
I'll take it from here, and then you can collect your thoughts on that part. I think basically, I think that probably, and maybe I can share what I think would be true for both of us, is just like losing that element of reverence and the sacred for them, and it becoming a drug, like, repeating the mistakes that we've had in psychiatry and in healthcare, of looking for a pill that's going to fix our problems. And one of the perils is that is how this medicine is being touted and advertised in mainstream media as the new wonder drug. And it's really not about that. It's not about taking a drug that's going to change you. It's about learning from an experience that you can apply to your life, and that we can apply to our systems and our society. And so if we can do that, then we're headed in the right direction. But if we just try to fit this into the same box, but a more exciting and effective box, it's going to lead us into some dark places, I think.
I agree with you. Yeah. It's not your Prozac. We are getting right up to the edge of time, and I think there might be one or two more questions. Is it okay if you go over for a minute or two? Do you guys have a little time? Okay. So let's see. What's the next question we have here? Okay. Tess says, from my experience, nurses I've worked with wouldn't exactly be open-minded to mainstream psychedelic therapy. With that said, what would you recommend for moving the conversation forward with them, if at all? That's a great question. Thank you, Tess.
I would say sharing current research on the topic is a good way of opening people's minds. Maybe any current news stories on the benefits of the medicine. Obviously, not pushing. You don't want to push it onto people, but you could share, and then maybe they might be open to receive more information, or they might go out and explore it on their own. But just to really keep the conversation going, because there are a lot of research articles out there, and Stephanie has been part of a lot of them. Currently, the last one was an American Journal of Nursing that was published.
It was their first in
Mhm.
like since the 60s, actually.
Yeah, that was amazing.
But
Mhm.
yes, I would agree with that. And
Mhm.
also, you might be surprised. I mean, it's becoming
Mhm.
pretty mainstream, and
Mhm.
I think a lot of people have either heard about it or a family member has brought it to their attention or something.
Mhm.
So I would say if you might feel nervous about having those conversations, try, just start
Mhm.
trying with somebody that maybe feels a little bit
Mhm.
more open-minded, and keep going and see if people really are closed off to it as you might think that they might be, because you might be surprised.
Mhm.
I completely agree with that. I'd also suggest maybe sending them to open nurses to our website and our code of ethics and mission
Show them
statement, because
there's an
it's a
organization,
growing
legitimate.
group of people.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I
For
love
sure.
your code of ethics, the Open Nurses Code of Ethics. I
Mhm.
think it's so beautiful. It really highlights the unique gifts that nursing has to bring as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
We're calling y'all in. Got to do this together, right?
Yeah.
We are a powerful group of nurses together, and we can really influence the direction this work is going, I think. It looks like Open Nurses did post your article in the chat, so you guys can always take a look at that. Another question or two, and then we should probably wrap it up. And I want to make sure before we go our separate ways that you let us know how to get in touch with you, and what do you want to let us know about your next cohort, perhaps, or yeah. So where do we want to go next? Do we have another question? Here we go. If you could go back and give your younger self a bit of advice, any advice, what would it be? And it can't just be buy Bitcoin. What is it?
Hmm. I think if I think back to my nursing journey, my first nursing job was in oncology in a acute care center in New York, and it was so intense. And I left and I went into hospice, and that was the better environment for me. But I almost feel like there was like unfinished business, I think, and I almost feel like I wish I had stayed a little bit longer to really, even though it was very hard and not really in alignment with my values, I feel like because of that, like I could have learned more in a sense, and I could have
Hmm.
more refined my ability for my self-care in an environment where it was difficult. And so I guess for nurses, I would say when you're in a difficult situation that feels hard and feels systemically challenging, that could be the place where you learn the most.
So stick with it.
Stick with it. I mean, not necessarily like stick with it until it's not the time anymore, but I just feel like that is a really valuable experience at the same time, even when it's hard.
I like that. Thank you. How about you, Naku?
For me, I overworked myself when I was in my 20s. I worked, at one point, I was working 7 days a week. So the advice that I'd give my
That's crazy.
That is crazy.
yeah, it's crazy. Like I allowed myself to be talked into taking extra shifts. So I would tell my younger self to stand up more for themselves and learn how to say no, and learn how to speak up for nurses in themselves. And you don't always have to say yes all the time. That saying no is very powerful.
I think nurses advocating for nurses is a really big part of this too.
Mhm.
Absolutely. That's a really good
I
point.
mean, that's what we're seeing in our course is
Mhm.
there's actually a lot of nurses that have come to the course saying, I'm taking this course because I and taking a break from nursing because it just got to a place where I couldn't handle it anymore. The system was really messed up from their perspective, and they were overworked, and they're coming to take this course to try to revitalize their their nursing practice. And so seeing that, I feel offering this course is not just about what nurses bring to psychedelics, but what about the psychedelic paradigm can bring to nursing, and how we can change some other paradigms of our work, because it's just, for some people, it's not working anymore. And the last 2 years has really shown us that we can't afford to lose nurses the way that we have been. And so, yes, advocating for each other, I feel like that's been revitalized for me personally by teaching this course. And I think that is also something that psychedelic medicine is going to bring into the picture.
Oh my gosh, you're giving me goosebumps.
We're going to realize we can't keep doing things the way that we have been. It's just not, it's not right.
It's not healthy. It's not healing people.
Yeah.
No, you can't wound the healers more. Like, no, it's not working. I think we might have one more question. It looks like one just popped on. Can you pop that last one up there? Do you see plant entheogens as a way that nurses can heal the trauma which they experience on the job?
Well, I know that there are some trials underway right now for healthcare professionals using psilocybin. So that's really exciting. And that's just research in the research stages, so not available super widely, but that's exciting that that's happening. And yes, I absolutely think that that's just exactly what we're just talking about, that we need healing, and we need to be more whole in order to be able to come to people in a good way.
That's great. Also, I would say you can do ketamine is also being used for people with secondary trauma. So it's an option. That was great. Well, you guys, thank you so much. I feel like I could talk to you for another hour about all of this, but could you tell us like a little about how people can reach you, how people can know more about what you're up to, what's in the works for you?
Our course site is nursingsacredmedicine.thinkific.com.
Okay.
So that's where we would love for you to visit, and you can find out about our 2 upcoming courses, or the 2 versions of our course. The one that we just released, which is the self-paced version. And so I'll back up. Our first version is our cohort version, where there's online material, and then we meet 3 times over Zoom. And so that's where you can connect with us and with other learners. And so we are taking a break right now because I'm on maternity leave. I just had my first baby. Thank you. And so we'll be starting that back up in the new year at some point, probably early 2022. But in the meantime, if you want to get started now, or if you just have like a chaotic, busy life like many of us do, and you want to go at your own pace, there's a self-paced version where there's not the online in-person meetings. There's the just the online content. And so there's readings, there's videos, there's PowerPoint presentations, there is interactive message boards, so you can still interact with your peers. So you can check it out at our website there. Then you can also check us out on Instagram at Nursing Sacred Medicine. And my website is hopeholistic.com.
How wonderful. How about you, Naku? Anywhere for you personally?
But we also have Facebook.
Yes, that's
page.
also on Facebook.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Awesome. Well, you guys, thank you so much. What a wellspring of information you have to share. If you two would stick around for a second as we end the broadcast, we can still just wrap it up. But thank you, everyone that has watched live and participated and asked great questions. And for those of you that watch the replay, please share, please like and subscribe on our YouTube channel. Follow everybody's Instagrams and Facebooks, because it really helps us spread the word and, nurses.
Thank you so much, Open Nurses, A, for having us on tonight, and B, for just doing incredible work. We're really happy that you exist and are moving things forward.
Wow, so grateful for you too. Thank you so much. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.